Looking for someone to interview who was there at Woodstock in 1969. You wouldn't happen to know anyone, would you?
I was there at Woodstock in 1969. It was a magical time, or at least I assumed it was. I only came up from my drug trip for about 30 minutes on day 2 to look for some food. Never found any, though. But I do know all about Woodstock. What do you need to know?
Well, old man, I need to know everything. Why did it happen? What was it like? What was its impact on the social culture of the 1960s? I also need a really sweet and well-worded thesis on the whole thing.
Well, Sonny, I can tell you all of that and more. For starters, I would say this is your thesis. Woodstock was the single greatest achievement of the rising counterculture movement of the 1960s, that while being first viewed as a disaster, has become an event in world history that was the peace-driven climax of both the hippie culture and the 1960s as a whole.
Wow, old man, that thesis was just good enough that I don't think it needs to be edited at all in the final cut of my project.
Well, son, it's the last quarter of the school year, and I think that thesis is as good as it's going to get. Now let's talk about Woodstock.
Okay.
The 4 men that are responsible for making the Woodstock Festival happen were Michael Lang, John Roberts, Joel Rosenman, and Artie Kornfeld. The whole concert was initially just a way to raise money to open up a recording studio in Woodstock, New York. The initial plans were to hold the concert in Woodstock, but when the whole town got nervous about having a bunch of drugged-up, sex-crazed hippies in their town, they shut the idea down. The next plan was to hold the concert in a nearby town, Wallkill, which was also shot down when the town learned about how many people might actually be coming. In the end, the festival took place on Maxie Oscar's dairy farm, where the concert planning committee quickly prepared for the masses of crowds that would be coming. A rough fence was erected around the area where the concert would be taking place, and a stage was built. With acts signed up and the venue as ready as it ever would be, people began showing up.
How many people came? Did it cost money to get in? Did they have enough food to feed all the people?
Slow down, sonny boy. Orders are all that in good time. More than 500,000 people attended the festival, shattering previous estimates. People initially had to buy tickets to get in, but the masses eventually just ripped down the fence, and the concert and the entire occasion was declared to be a free event. There were numerous problems that arose from the massive numbers of people, starting with a significant lack of food. Some who attended the festival had planned ahead and brought food, but many did not and spent large amounts of the festival hungry. Numerous groups aided, however, including the U.S. Army, who dropped in food, and several religious organizations. The next biggest problem was the lack of toilets. 500,000 people produced a lot of poop in 3 days, and there were not nearly enough toilets at the festival, so one can imagine it got pretty disgusting. Rain also assisted in turning the entire festival into a mud pit for a time, but the hippies continued on anyway. The biggest problem with the amount of people that showed up was the traffic. There were so many cars, the traffic went on for miles, and numerous major roads and highways. There were several medical emergencies that required airlifts out of the festival, since ambulances couldn't reach the farm, and there were varying reports of babies being born right out in the field.
What was the drug use like? Was it bad?
They will give you different reports on how much drugs were actually being used. Some youth groups attended the festival and had fine times, the children none the wiser to what some of the people they were around were on. Some will say that the drug use was rampant and terrible, with almost everyone in the festival completely whacked out of their minds the entire time. The reality is this: it was a bunch of hippies. Of course there was drug use, and it was rather widespread. There were tents erected for people to wait out bad trips. There was a widespread use of all kinds of drugs, from marijuana to heroin, and when the stands selling food ran out of food, they began selling dope instead. However, in the entire festival, there were only 3 recorded deaths, and only 2 of them were drug overdoses. One guy got ran over by a tractor, but that's beside the point. Woodstock was the occasion where all these hippies got to let their freak flags fly, surrounded by countless other people with similar views on the world. People were free to do what they wanted, and act as they pleased without fear of being judged by those around them. Woodstock was about expression, about breaking off from the way that those people's parents would have wanted them to act, and one of the ways that those people expressed themselves was through drug use. All in all, the drug use was definitely quite rampant at Woodstock, but it definitely could have ended much worse.
Anything to say about the acts at Woodstock?
The acts at Woodstock showcased some of the greatest talents of the 60s, and even helped to springboard a few different artists' careers. Jimi Hendrix was the last act to perform at Woodstock, and his rendition of the national anthem on electric guitar, with his blue beaded jacket on and his red bandana wrapped around, is viewed as the defining moment of the 1960s.
Thank you for all of this awesome first-hand information. Do you have anything else left to say?
Yes, honey boy. One more thing. While the drugged-up hippies that filled that field might not have been viewed most highly at the time, the whole event is truly a remarkable spectacle. 500,000 people could have turned into a complete disaster. Those people all spent 3 days calmly and peacefully celebrating music and love. The whole event has become a spectacle in American history, the culmination of an entire decade of anti-war sentiment and the counterculture desire to break away and be different. It has over the years come to be more generally viewed as what it truly was, a great miraculous gathering of peace and music